The auction block stank of desperation and bad whiskey. Eliza Vance stood there like a piece of furniture nobody wanted to haul home, third in line, shoulders back despite everything, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. The platform was rough pine, splinters catching her worn skirt, and the afternoon sun hammered down on Red Hollow's main street with the kind of heat that made men mean and decisions stupid. She'd stopped crying about it 2 days ago. Crying didn't change anything. "Next up," barked Silas Kern, the auctioneer, a man whose moral code began and ended with his commission. "Eliza Vance, 26 years old, can read and write, apparently." He said it like it was a defect. "Worked as she's worked various positions." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Not the good kind. Eliza kept her eyes on the mountains beyond the town, those brutal peaks that promised nothing but honest indifference. Better than the dishonest cruelty down here. "Starting bid, gentlemen. Do I hear?" $50, someone called. More laughter. That was insult money. That was the price of a lame horse. She'd known this was coming. When the hospital board in Chicago had discovered her secret, not just that she was a woman who'd trained in surgery by lying about her name, but that she'd dared to operate without their blessing, they'd made sure she'd never practice again. Blacklisted, shamed, shipped west with nothing but the clothes on her back and a reputation that preceded her like a plague warning, and then the money had run out. 50 going once. 60. Another voice, tinged with cruelty. She recognized him. Dutch carrier who ran the supply depot and had a wife already, which apparently didn't matter for this kind of transaction. His grin showed too many gaps. The mountains kept their silence. Eliza wished she could do the same, but Kern was yanking her forward by the elbow, displaying her like damaged goods at a clearance sale. "Come now, gentlemen. Surely someone sees potential here." What they saw was a woman too tall, too thin, with hands too rough from work, and a face that had forgotten how to arrange itself into pleasing softness. They saw the scar on her left cheek from a laudanum addict's broken bottle in Chicago. They saw someone who'd already been discarded by better men in better places. 65, Dutch called, warming to the sport of it. Eliza's jaw tightened. She'd survived worse than this. She'd cut into living flesh while men screamed, had held beating hearts in her palms, had watched life slip away despite her best efforts, and come back to try again the next day. She'd endured things that would have broken these frontier peacocks. But standing here being appraised like livestock, something in her chest compressed until breathing hurt. 65 going once. $100. The voice came from the back, deep, quiet, and utterly certain. The crowd shifted, muttering. Eliza couldn't see who'd spoken, but the mood changed instantly. Laughter died like a candle in the wind. 100, Kern repeated, suddenly nervous. "That's, Mr. Hale, I presume?" $100, the voice repeated. Closer now. "Cash." The crowd parted like water around a stone. Rowan Hale was not a large man, but he occupied space like he'd carved it out with his bare hands and defended it against all comers. Maybe 6 feet, lean in the way of things that survived on skill rather than strength, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of winter storms. He wore clothes that had seen hard use, a Colt revolver that hadn't, and an expression that suggested he'd rather be literally anywhere else. But he walked up to that auction block like he owned it. "Mr. Hale?" Kern stammered. "We weren't expecting, that is, we haven't seen you in town since—" 100, Rowan repeated. He didn't look at Eliza. Didn't look at anyone. "You taking it or not?" Kern's Adam's apple bobbed. "Well, sir, the bidding isn't technically—" 200. Someone in the crowd gasped. That was real money. That was what you paid for quality breeding stock or a promising mining claim. Rowan finally looked up at Eliza. Not at her body, not assessing her like meat. He looked at her eyes, held them for exactly 3 seconds, and in that brief moment she saw something she hadn't expected. Recognition. Not of her specifically, of something in her that matched something in him. The look of someone who'd been chewed up and spit out by the world and was still standing out of pure spite. 200, Kern echoed weakly. "Do I hear?" "You don't," Rowan said flatly. "We done here?" The crowd had gone silent. Dutch Carrier looked like he wanted to object but couldn't quite figure out how. Nobody argued with Rowan Hale. Not in Red Hollow, not if they wanted to keep their teeth. The stories about him were mostly whispers. A trapper who'd lost his family to cholera 5 years back, or maybe it was fever, or maybe something worse that people didn't talk about. He'd gone into the mountains after and stayed there, coming down only when he needed supplies, speaking to no one, taking nothing from anyone. Men had tried to follow him once, thinking his cabin might be near a good claim. They'd come back 3 days later, lost, half-frozen, and unwilling to discuss what had happened. After that, people left Rowan Hale alone. Sold, Kern managed, to Mr. Hale for $200. Rowan counted out the money without ceremony, actual bills, not scrip, and held out a hand to help Eliza down from the platform. She didn't take it, climbed down herself, knees steady despite everything. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, maybe approval. "You got belongings?" he asked. "No." "Good, we're leaving." He turned and walked toward the edge of town where a pack mule waited, loaded with supplies. Didn't check if she was following, just expected it. Eliza stood there for exactly 5 seconds, weighing her options. She could run, but to where? She could refuse, but then what? The money was paid. The transaction complete. In this place, at this time, she'd just been purchased like a sack of flour. But something in the way he'd looked at her, that moment of recognition, that bare hint of respect in his tone when he'd asked about belongings rather than ordering her to gather them. She followed. The crowd watched them go in silence. No cheers, no jeers, just the uncomfortable quiet of people who'd witnessed something they didn't quite understand and weren't sure they liked. They were a mile outside Red Hollow before Rowan spoke again. "You know how to ride?" "No." "Shoot?" "Yes." He glanced back at her, genuinely surprised. She'd kept pace with him and the mule without complaint, her worn boots kicking up dust, her face set in an expression that suggested she'd walk until she dropped before asking him to slow down. "You shoot well?" "Well enough." Another mile passed. The mountains grew closer, their peaks still touched with last winter's snow despite the summer heat. The trail narrowed, winding into scrub pine and broken rock. "Why'd you pay so much?" Eliza finally asked. Not because she was grateful, because she needed to understand the cost. Rowan didn't answer immediately. He adjusted the mule's lead, checked the sky, and kept walking. "Needed someone," he said eventually. "For what?" "Living." "You've been living alone for 5 years." He stopped then, turned to face her fully. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the exhaustion that went bone deep, the carefully maintained distance he kept from everything. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I have." There was a story there. Pain, probably. Loss, definitely. But he wasn't offering it, and she wasn't asking. "I can't cook worth a damn," Eliza said bluntly. "I'm not good with pleasantries or keeping house. I don't sew well. I don't know the first thing about frontier living, and if you're expecting some kind of," she gestured vaguely, "arrangement beyond basic survival, you paid too much." Rowan's expression didn't change. "Can you work?" "Yes." "Can you learn?" "I've learned worse." He nodded once, turned, and started walking again. "That'll do." The sun was setting by the time they reached the foothills proper. The temperature dropped fast up here, the air thinning, and Eliza's breath started coming harder. She didn't complain, wouldn't give him the satisfaction. But when she stumbled on loose shale, Rowan caught her elbow, not roughly, just steadying, and kept his hand there until she'd found her footing. "It's another hour," he said. "Get steep." "I'll manage." "Wasn't asking if you could, telling you what to expect." They climbed in silence as darkness fell. The trail was barely visible, but Rowan moved with the certainty of someone who could walk it blind. The mule followed placidly. Eliza focused on breathing, on placing her feet, on not thinking about what the hell she'd just agreed to. The cabin appeared suddenly, tucked into a fold of the mountain like it had grown there. Rough-hewn logs, a stone chimney, oiled canvas over the windows. Small, but solid. Built to last. Rowan unloaded the mule with practiced efficiency, carrying supplies inside without ceremony. Eliza stood in the doorway, taking it in. One room, basically. A stove, a rough table, shelves stocked with basics. Furs on the floor. A bed in the corner. One bed. You'll take the bed, Rowan said, reading her hesitation. I'll sleep there. He pointed to a pallet near the stove. That's not... Wasn't asking. He moved past her, started building up the fire. Within minutes, warmth began pushing back the mountain cold. Eliza sat at the table, exhaustion finally catching up. Her feet throbbed, her head ached. Everything felt surreal, like she'd wandered into someone else's life. Rowan set a plate in front of her. Cold venison, hard bread, water. Not much, but more than she'd had in 2 days. Eat, he said. We'll talk terms in the morning. Terms? You think I don't know what this looks like? He sat across from her, his own plate mostly empty. I bought you. That's what happened, legally speaking. But up here, laws are what we make them. So we'll make terms we can both live with. Eliza studied him, trying to find the angle, the trap, the moment when his reasonableness would crack and show what he really wanted. But his eyes were steady, tired, yes. Grieving, probably, but steady. Why me? She asked. There were younger women, prettier ones, more suitable. Didn't want suitable, Rowan said. Wanted someone who'd survive. How'd you know I would? Saw how you stood up there. He took a drink of water. Everyone else was broken or pretending. You were just angry. I'm still angry. Good. Anger keeps you alive longer than hope. They ate in silence. Outside, something howled in the distance. Wolves, maybe, or just the wind playing tricks. The fire crackled. The mountain settled around them like a presence. I was a surgeon, Eliza said suddenly. Didn't know why she was telling him. Maybe because he hadn't asked. In Chicago, trained under a man's name because they wouldn't let women near an operating theater. I was good, better than good, but they found out and... She shrugged. Didn't matter how good I was after that. Rowan considered this. You still know how? I'd need supplies, equipment, but yes. Might be useful. Might be. Another silence, but it felt different now. Less like two strangers forced together, more like two people taking each other's measure and finding it adequate. The bed's yours, Rowan said again, standing. There's a basin for washing. Outhouse is 30 feet north. Follow the rope if it's dark. Don't wander off the path. Mountain doesn't forgive mistakes. Eliza nodded, too tired to argue or analyze further. But as she lay down on the surprisingly comfortable bed, real mattress, stuffed with something that didn't feel like straw, she heard Rowan moving quietly around the cabin. Banking the fire, checking the door, small sounds of someone making a space safe. She'd expected cruelty, or at best indifference. This felt like something else entirely. Outside, the mountain wind picked up, singing through the pines. Inside, warmth held, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Eliza Vance fell asleep without crying. She woke to the smell of coffee. Not good coffee, but coffee nonetheless. Gray dawn light filtered through the canvas windows. Rowan was already up, dressed, moving with quiet efficiency. Storm coming, he said without preamble. Big one. We've got today to prepare. Eliza sat up, her body protesting. Every muscle ached from yesterday's climb. Prepare how? Firewood, water, checking the roof seal, bringing in the mule. He poured coffee into a tin cup, handed it to her. You work, you eat. You don't. You don't. Fair? Fair. Also, he continued, terms. You want to hear them now or later? Now. He sat at the table, his own coffee steaming. You're free to leave whenever you want. I'll take you down. Give you enough for stage fare east. No questions asked. Eliza blinked. What? If this doesn't work, I'm not keeping you prisoner. That's not... He seemed to struggle for words. That's not what this is. Then what is it? Partnership, maybe. Two people who've got no place else to go, trying to survive somewhere that doesn't care if we live or die. He met her eyes. I need help up here. Winter's brutal alone. Having someone who can think, who can work, who can handle things if I get injured or sick, that's worth more than any other arrangement. And you think I can handle that? You stood on that auction block and didn't break. You walked 5 miles up a mountain without complaint. You told me straight what you can't do instead of lying about it. He shrugged. I've seen men crumble over less. Eliza sipped the terrible coffee, thinking. What do you get out of this? Not dying alone in a snowdrift. He said it flatly, without self-pity. Not going completely feral, someone to talk to who isn't a mule. Maybe, he paused, maybe remembering what it's like to be human. The honesty of it struck her. No pretense, no false promises, just raw truth. And if I stay, she said slowly, what exactly are you expecting from me? Work, honestly, competence when it matters. Beyond that? He stood, draining his coffee. I'm not interested in forcing anything. We'll figure out the rest as we go. That's remarkably civilized for someone who lives like a hermit. Yeah, well, something crossed his face. Old pain. I wasn't always this way. He headed for the door, then paused. Storm hits by afternoon. If you're staying, we need to move. If you're leaving, tell me now and I'll take you down before it gets bad. Eliza looked around the cabin. Small, rough, isolated, but clean, organized, safe. She thought about Red Hollow, about Chicago before that, about every place that had chewed her up and spit her out for having the audacity to be competent while female. Here, at least, the mountain didn't care what she was. It would kill her, or it wouldn't, based purely on whether she was strong enough to survive. There was something almost refreshing about that kind of honesty. I'm staying, she said. Rowan nodded once. Then let's get to work. The storm hit like a living thing. By noon, the wind was screaming through the pines, bending trees nearly double. The temperature plummeted. Snow began falling, not the gentle kind, but horizontal ice crystals that stung exposed skin like needles. They'd spent the morning in constant motion. Eliza hauled water until her shoulders burned, stacked firewood until her hands bled, learned to read the mountain's moods by watching how Rowan moved, what he checked, where he looked. He didn't coddle her. When she struggled with a load of wood, he showed her a better way to carry it, then let her figure it out. When she asked stupid questions about the stove, he answered without mockery. When she did something right, he just nodded and moved on. It was the most respect she'd been shown in years. Now, with the storm raging outside, they were sealed in. The cabin groaned under the wind's assault, but held. The fire burned hot. Supplies were within reach. They were ready. First rule, Rowan said, checking the window seals one last time. Don't go outside during a storm like this. Not for anything, not even if you hear something. Hear what? Anything. Wind plays tricks, makes you think you hear voices, animals, whatever. It's lying. You go out in this, you die. Eliza nodded, filing that away. Second rule. If something happens to me, if I'm injured, sick, whatever, there's a cache 300 yards east. Follow the blaze marks on the trees. Supplies, ammunition, enough to get you through a month. Map to the nearest settlement. Why are you telling me this? Because things happen, and I'd rather you survive them. He said it matter-of-factly, like he was discussing the weather. But Eliza heard what he wasn't saying. I've already lost people. I won't be responsible for losing you too. The day wore on. The storm intensified. They ate in shifts, tended the fire, checked and rechecked everything that could fail. Rowan carved something from a piece of pine, his hand steady despite the cold. Eliza watched, fascinated despite herself. What is it? She finally asked. He held it up, a small bird, remarkably detailed. Sparrow. Used to make them for... He stopped, set it down carefully. Habit. For his child, Eliza realized. The one he'd lost. The one he wouldn't talk about. It's beautiful, she said quietly. Rowan grunted, non-committal, but she saw his hands gentle on the carving before he set it on a shelf with others. A whole row of small wooden birds, each one perfect, each one a prayer to someone who'd never see them. Night fell early, the storm still raging. They settled into an awkward routine, Rowan on his pallet, Eliza in the bed, the fire between them like a demilitarized zone. But exhaustion made strange bedfellows of necessity. And sometime in the deep hours, when the wind threatened to tear the cabin apart and the temperature inside dropped despite the fire, Rowan spoke into the darkness. You scared? Eliza considered lying, decided against it. Yes. Good. Fear's honest. It'll keep you sharp. Are you scared? Long pause. Every day. Of what? Forgetting. His voice was rough. Forgetting what it felt like to care about something, to want to wake up, to think tomorrow might be worth seeing. Eliza stared at the ceiling, listening to the storm. Is that why you came down? Why you bought me? Maybe. Or maybe I just got tired of talking to the mule. She surprised herself by laughing. Short, sharp, but genuine. In the darkness, she heard what might have been Rowan smiling. The storm blew itself out by morning. 3 weeks passed like a fever dream. Eliza learned to split wood without destroying her hands, learned to read the weather and the color of the sky, the behavior of birds, the smell of the wind, learned which plants were edible, which would kill you, which could heal. Rowan taught her without patience, but without cruelty. Showed her once, expected her to remember. Corrected her mistakes bluntly, but without shame. She made a lot of mistakes, but she learned, and slowly the cabin stopped feeling like a prison, started feeling like something else. Not home, not yet, maybe not ever, but a place where she could breathe without armor. Rowan remained largely silent, but she began to read his silences. The tight one when he was worried about weather, the heavy one when he was thinking about what he'd lost, the almost peaceful one when they'd finished a hard day's work and the mountain hadn't killed them. They fell into rhythms. She'd make coffee, still terrible. He'd cook, surprisingly decent. They'd work until exhaustion took them, sleep hard, wake, and do it again. It wasn't romance, wasn't even friendship, really, but it was honest. And then, on a bright Tuesday morning, everything changed. The sound of a horse struggling up the trail. Rowan heard it first, went still like a predator scenting prey. His hand dropped to his revolver. "Stay inside," he ordered. But Eliza had already seen his face, had seen the calculation happening behind his eyes. Someone coming up here was either lost or desperate, and neither one was good. She watched through the window as a man on a half-dead horse finally crested the rise. Young, maybe 20, his face gray with pain. He was holding his leg, and even from here Eliza could see the blood. "Please," he called out, his voice cracking. "Please, I need—" He fell from the horse. Rowan swore, vicious and creative. But he was already moving, catching the young man before he hit the ground completely. Eliza was out the door before she could think about it, her old training kicking in like muscle memory. "Get him inside," she snapped. Not a request. Rowan shot her a look, half surprise, half something else. But he complied, hauling the injured man into the cabin with surprising gentleness. Eliza was already clearing the table, her mind cataloging what she'd need. "Put him here, on his back. Careful of the leg." The young man was fading in and out of consciousness, mumbling something about a fall, a ravine, couldn't stop the bleeding. Eliza cut away his trouser leg and her breath caught. Compound fracture, bone through skin. The leg bent at an angle that made her stomach clench. Infection already setting in, she could smell it. "How long ago?" she demanded. Two days, the man gasped. Tried to set it myself. Jesus. Rowan was staring at the leg, his face pale. But Eliza's mind was already working. Cool, clear. This was what she'd trained for. This was what they'd tried to take from her. "I need boiling water, clean cloth, your sharpest knife, whiskey if you have it, something for him to bite on." She was already examining the wound, her hand steady despite everything. "And I need you to hold him down." Rowan didn't question her, just moved, gathering supplies with the same efficiency he brought to everything. The young man's eyes focused on Eliza, terror and hope warring in them. "You can fix it?" She met his gaze squarely. "I can try, but it's going to hurt worse than anything you've ever felt, and there's a chance you'll lose the leg anyway if the infection's too deep." "Better than dying." "Debatable in about 5 minutes." She took the whiskey Rowan handed her, made the man drink half, used the rest to wash her hands and the wound. "What's your name?" "Thomas. Thomas Riker." "All right, Thomas. I'm going to set this bone and clean out the infection. You're going to scream. Rowan's going to hold you down. And if you're very lucky, you'll wake up tomorrow with 2 legs instead of 1. She didn't give him time to think about it, just nodded to Rowan, who moved into position, his weight holding Thomas's shoulders. And then Eliza went to work. It was brutal. Thomas screamed himself unconscious within 30 seconds. The bone resisted, the flesh was inflamed, and the infection had to be cut out with a precision that made her hands ache. But her training held. Muscle memory took over. She reduced the fracture, debrided the wound, set a splint with materials Rowan provided without being asked, and sutured with thread she boiled 3 times. By the time she finished, her hands were shaking and her shirt was soaked with sweat. But the leg was set. The wound was clean. Thomas was breathing steadily. She'd done it. Rowan was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. "Where the hell did you learn that?" he asked quietly. "Chicago. 5 years training. Another 3 practicing." She washed her hands, suddenly exhausted. "I told you, I was a surgeon." "You said you'd trained. I thought you meant, I don't know, assisting, maybe." "No." She looked at Thomas, checking his pulse, his color. "I meant I cut into people and put them back together. Saved some. Lost some. Did it anyway." Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then, "He gonna live?" "If the infection doesn't take him, yes. I'll need to watch him, change the dressing. Keep him still for at least a week." "He can stay." Eliza looked up, surprised. "Just like that?" "You just saved his life. I'm not throwing him out to die on the trail." Rowan started cleaning up, his movements methodical. "Besides, gives you a chance to prove you're as good as you say." "I don't need to prove anything." "No," he agreed. "But maybe the world needs to see it anyway." Well, Thomas Riker stayed for 8 days. During that time, he told them his story in fragments. He'd been working a claim 20 miles south, hit a vein of something promising, got too excited and careless on the climb back to camp. The fall should have killed him. Would have, if not for Eliza. She tended him with the same efficient competence she brought to everything. Changed his dressings, monitored for fever, adjusted the splint as the swelling went down. And slowly, impossibly, he healed. Rowan watched all of it with an expression she couldn't quite read. On the 5th day, while Thomas slept and they worked outside, he finally spoke. "You could do this for real, you know." "Do what?" "This. Help people." He was stacking firewood, not looking at her. "There's no real doctor within 50 miles of here. People get hurt, they just die mostly, or suffer through it. I'm not licensed. I'm not even supposed to practice. The mountain doesn't care about licenses." Eliza stopped working. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe there's a reason you ended up here. Maybe it wasn't just about surviving." He met her eyes then. "Maybe it was about remembering who you are." Before she could respond, Thomas called out weakly from inside. Fever spiking again. She went to him and for the next 6 hours fought to keep the infection from taking hold. It was close, too close, but she won. When Thomas's fever finally broke in the deep hours before dawn, Eliza collapsed into a chair, shaking with exhaustion and relief. Rowan brought her coffee, sat across from her. "You're wasted up here," he said quietly. "I thought you needed help surviving." "I do, but they need you more." He gestured vaguely toward the valley, the distant settlements, the territory beyond. "People are dying down there from things you could fix." "And what? I just set up shop? Start practicing without authority?" "Authority doesn't mean much out here. Results do." He leaned forward. "Thomas is going to talk. He's going to tell everyone about the woman on the mountain who saved his leg when any other doctor would have amputated. Word's going to spread." "That's not... I can't... Why not?" "Because I failed." The words burst out before she could stop them. "I failed in Chicago. I got caught. I lost everything. What makes you think I won't fail again?" "Because you're not that person anymore," Rowan said simply. "Chicago broke you and you're still here, still fighting, still saving lives when you could have given up." He stood, walked to the window. "I came up here to die slowly, to just fade away where nobody had to watch. But you showing up, you fixing him?" He turned back to her. "Maybe we both got a second chance. Question is whether we're brave enough to take it." Eliza looked at Thomas, sleeping peacefully now. Looked at her hands, steadier than they'd been in months. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Good. That means it matters." 8 days after he'd arrived more dead than alive, Thomas Riker rode down the mountain with 2 working legs, a proper splint, careful instructions, and a story he'd tell anyone who'd listen. About the woman who'd saved him when he should have died. About the miracle on the mountain. About Eliza Vance. And in the cabin, as they watched him go, Rowan turned to Eliza with something new in his eyes. Not just respect, hope. Storm's coming, he said. Bigger than the last one, but I think we're ready. Eliza looked at the mountains, felt the wind shifting, tasted the change in the air. Yeah, she said, I think we are. She didn't know it yet, but Thomas Riker's story was already spreading, and with it, something dangerous. Attention, the kind that would bring desperate people seeking help, and the kind that would bring powerful men seeking control. The storm was coming, all right, but it wouldn't be weather. The first one arrived 6 days later, just after dawn. Eliza was checking their water supply when she heard the hoarse, labored breathing, uneven gait. She'd learned to read those sounds now, the way Rowan did. This one was carrying weight it shouldn't be. Rowan was already at the door, rifle in hand but pointed down. Cautious, not aggressive. The rider was a woman, maybe 40, her face carved hard by sun and worry. She had a child wrapped in blankets across the saddle in front of her, and even from a distance, Eliza could hear the wet, rattling cough. Please, the woman called out, her voice scraped raw. Thomas Riker said, he said there was someone up here who could help. Rowan glanced at Eliza, eyebrows raised. Your call, the look said. Eliza was already moving forward. The child was a girl, maybe 7, burning with fever. Pneumonia, probably. The kind that killed half the children who got it out here, where the nearest real doctor was 3 days' hard ride and might as well have been on the moon. Bring her inside, Eliza said, and the woman nearly sobbed with relief. Her name was Martha Connolly. The girl was Sarah. They'd been fighting the fever for 4 days, trying everything. Whiskey rubs, cold compresses, prayers that went unanswered. Then Martha had heard about Thomas Riker's leg, about the woman on the mountain, and she'd saddled up before her husband could stop her. He said I was crazy, Martha whispered while Eliza examined Sarah, listening to her lungs, checking her throat. Said no woman doctor could be real, that it was probably just some fraud taking advantage. But I saw Thomas walking on that leg. I saw it. Your husband might be right about the woman doctor part, Eliza said absently, her mind working through symptoms and treatments. But he's wrong about the fraud. Sarah's lungs were bad, but not destroyed. The infection was deep, but maybe not too deep. If Eliza could bring the fever down, keep her airways clear, get some actual medicine into her, instead of folk remedies and hope. Rowan, she said, not looking up, I need that medical kit I asked you about last week, the one I said we should order from Denver. Don't have it yet, takes 3 weeks minimum. Then I need willow bark, as much as you can find. Honey if we have it, clean cloth, hot water. She met Martha's terrified eyes. And I need you to trust me, because what I'm about to do is going to look like I'm hurting her. Martha swallowed hard. Will she live? I don't know. But she'll die if we do nothing. Then do something. Eliza worked for 6 hours straight. Steam treatments to loosen the congestion. Willow bark tea forced down Sarah's throat for the fever. Careful positioning to help drain the lungs. Rowan assisted without being asked, anticipating what she needed, holding Sarah still when the coughing fits became violent. Martha watched it all with the desperate intensity of someone watching their whole world balanced on a knife edge. By nightfall, Sarah's fever had dropped 2 degrees. By midnight, she was breathing easier. By dawn, she opened her eyes and asked for water in a voice that didn't rattle. Martha wept. Not quietly, great gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Eliza just nodded, exhausted, and went to check the girl's temperature again. Still elevated, but dropping. The worst was past. How much do I owe you? Martha asked when she'd collected herself. I don't have much, but... Nothing, Eliza said. But I said nothing. Just keep her warm. Keep giving her the tea. If the fever spikes again, come back. Martha stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. You're not charging anything? What am I going to do with money up here? Eliza gestured at the cabin, the mountain, the absolute middle of nowhere. You needed help. I helped. That's the transaction. Thomas said you were something special, Martha said quietly. He wasn't lying. They left that afternoon. Sarah bundled carefully. Martha's gratitude so thick it was almost uncomfortable. Rowan watched them go with that unreadable expression he wore when he was thinking hard about something. You know what you just did, he said. Saved a child's life. I'm aware. No. You opened a door. He turned to look at her. Martha's going to talk. just like Thomas did. And when people hear there's a doctor up here who doesn't charge, who actually cures people instead of just taking their money and shrugging when they die, they'll come, Eliza finished. I know. You ready for that? She thought about Chicago, about being driven out, about the shame and anger and the bitter certainty that she'd never practice medicine again. Then she thought about Sarah's breathing evening out, about Thomas walking on a leg that should have been amputated. No, she said honestly, but I'm doing it anyway. Rowan almost smiled. That's the first smart thing I've heard all week. The second patient arrived 3 days later, then 2 more the day after that. Then a steady trickle that became a stream. A man with an infected wound that was turning septic. A woman in labor with the baby positioned wrong. A teenager who'd been kicked by a horse and had internal bleeding. Eliza had to operate on with tools she improvised and prayers she didn't believe in. She saved most of them. Lost one. The man with the septic wound had waited too long, the infection too deep. She worked on him for 8 hours anyway, trying everything she knew, but sometimes knowledge wasn't enough. When he died, she walked out into the mountain dark and screamed until her throat was raw. Rowan found her an hour later, sitting on a rock, staring at nothing. You did everything you could, he said. It wasn't enough. It never is. That's why you keep trying. She looked at him, this man who'd bought her like property and then given her more freedom than she'd ever had. How do you live with it? The failing? I don't. He sat beside her. I just get up the next day and try not to fail again. They sat in silence while the mountain wind sang around them. After a while, Rowan spoke again. We need to expand. What? The cabin. It's too small. We've got people sleeping on the floor half the time. You need a proper surgery space, somewhere you can work without tripping over supplies. He was looking at the clearing, measuring with his eyes. I can build an addition. Take maybe 3 weeks if the weather holds. Rowan, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. He met her eyes. You gave me a reason to build something again. Let me build it. So he did. While Eliza treated the steady stream of patients, broken bones, difficult births, fevers, infections, every ailment the frontier could conjure, Rowan worked. He felled trees, stripped logs, fitted joints with a precision that spoke of old skill remembered. He worked dawn to dusk, sometimes beyond, building something that looked less like a cabin addition and more like a small clinic. They fell into new rhythms. Eliza would work on whoever needed her while Rowan built, but when she needed help, holding a patient down, lifting someone, or just a steady hand during a difficult procedure, he'd drop his tools without question. At night, exhausted, they'd compare notes. She'd tell him about the day's cases. He'd show her the progress on the building. And slowly, without either of them quite noticing when it happened, they stopped being 2 people surviving together and became something else. Partners, maybe. Or the beginning of something that didn't have a name yet. You ever think about going back? Eliza asked one night. They were sitting outside watching stars emerge. To whoever you were before. Rowan was quiet for a long time. I had a wife, Anna, daughter named Caroline. She was 4. Eliza waited. She'd learned his silences by now. This one meant he was deciding whether to continue. Cholera came through 5 years back, took half the settlement. I was out running trap lines when it hit. By the time I got back, he stopped, started again. Anna was already gone. Caroline lasted another day. I held her while she died. She kept asking why I couldn't fix it. I'm sorry, Eliza said quietly. I became a doctor's worst nightmare that week. Begged, threatened, offered everything I had. He tried. I'll give him that. But there was nothing he could do. Nothing anyone could do. Rowan's jaw tightened. After, I couldn't stay. Couldn't look at the house we'd built, the things we'd made. So I came up here to die slow instead of fast. But you didn't die. No, I just forgot how to live. He looked at her then. Until you showed up and reminded me what it's like to care whether tomorrow comes. Eliza didn't know what to say to that, so she just reached over and took his hand. He didn't pull away. They sat like that until the cold drove them inside, neither one wanting to be the first to let go. The clinic addition was nearly finished when the letter arrived. A writer brought it up, a professional courier who looked deeply uncomfortable with the mountain terrain. He handed it to Eliza, took his payment, and left fast enough to suggest he'd heard stories. The envelope was expensive paper. Official. The return address made her stomach drop. Chicago Medical Board. Rowan read her expression. Bad? Probably. She opened it, scanned the contents, felt her hands start shaking. It was a cease and desist. Someone had reported her presence, her practice. The board was informing her that she was operating illegally, that any further medical work would result in prosecution, and that she had 30 days to shut down or face the full weight of the law. Let me see that. Rowan took the letter, read it, then did something she didn't expect. He laughed. This isn't funny, Eliza said. It's hilarious. They think their authority reaches up here? He tossed the letter into the stove. Let them come. Let them try to enforce their rules on a mountain that doesn't care what they think. Rowan, they can arrest me. They can try. But first they'd have to get up here. Then they'd have to convince people to testify against you. Think Martha's going to do that? Thomas? Any of the 30-some people whose lives you've saved? He shook his head. You're not in Chicago anymore. Different rules, different stakes. You're talking about ignoring the law. I'm talking about ignoring bad law. There's a difference. Eliza wanted to argue, but part of her, the part that had been crushed by those same laws, that same board, wanted to believe him. What if they send someone? She asked. Then we deal with it when they do. But they didn't send just someone, they sent Victor Crowe. He arrived in Red Hollow 2 weeks later with enough money to buy silence and enough charm to make people want to give it to him for free. Eliza only heard about it third hand from a patient who'd come down with supplies. Big man from back east, the patient said, asking questions about you, offering rewards for information. What kind of information? Where you practice, who you've treated, whether you're charging. The patient, a rancher named Dutch Carrier who'd had a badly set shoulder Eliza had to re-break and fix, looked uncomfortable. Some folks are talking. Money's good, and not everyone up here loves the idea of a woman playing doctor. I'm not playing, Eliza said coldly. I know that. You fixed my shoulder when 3 other doctors said I'd never use it again. But not everyone's grateful like me. After he left, Rowan started checking his weapons more frequently, cleaned his rifle every night, started teaching Eliza to shoot. Not the basics she already knew, but the harder stuff. Moving targets, quick draws, shooting while scared. You think he'll come up here? She asked. Man like that? Yeah, he'll come. Question is what we do when he does. The answer came sooner than expected. Victor Crowe arrived on a Thursday, with 4 men and enough supplies to suggest he planned to stay a while. He rode up the mountain trail like he owned it, his horse probably worth more than everything Eliza and Rowan possessed combined. He was handsome in the way rich men often were, well-fed, well-groomed, completely confident in his ability to get what he wanted. Maybe 50, with silver threading his dark hair and eyes that calculated value in everything they saw. Rowan met him outside, rifle held casually but ready. Mr. Hale, Crowe said, not dismounting. I've heard a lot about you. Can't say the same, you are? Victor Crowe. I represent several business interests in Chicago and points west. I'm here about Miss Vance. She's not interested in whatever you're selling. I haven't made my offer yet. Crowe smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Perhaps we could discuss this inside. I've ridden a long way. Then you can ride back. We're done here. But Eliza stepped out of the cabin before Rowan could shut him down completely. She'd learned to read situations quickly over the past months. This man hadn't come all this way just to deliver a message. He wanted something. Mr. Crowe, she said, what do you want? Crowe's smile widened. Straight to business. I appreciate that. He finally dismounted, his men staying mounted and watchful. I want to make you an offer, Miss Vance, a legitimate one. I'm listening. You're wasting your talents up here, treating farmers and miners for free when you could be making real money. I represent a medical concern that's expanding west. We need skilled practitioners. I'm prepared to offer you a position, full license reinstatement, legal protection, and a salary of $5,000 a year. It was more money than she'd ever made in Chicago, more than she'd ever dreamed of making. In exchange for what? She asked. Your skills, your expertise, your time. He spread his hands. All legal, all proper, everything you've been denied. Rowan made a disgusted noise. She's not interested. But Crowe ignored him, focused entirely on Eliza. Think about it. No more working in primitive conditions. No more worrying about supplies. A real clinic, real equipment, real support. Where? Eliza asked. Red Hollow, to start. Then we'd expand. Build clinics throughout the territory. Bring real medicine to people who need it. Sounded perfect. Too perfect. What's the catch? She said. No catch, just business. Crowe pulled out a contract. Everything's outlined here. You'd work exclusively for our concern. We'd handle all legal issues, all licensing, everything. Eliza took the contract, started reading, got 3 paragraphs in before she found it. This says I'd have to charge patients, set rates. Of course, medicine isn't charity, Miss Vance. And these rates, she scanned further. These are 3 times what a doctor in Chicago charges. Premium for frontier service, perfectly reasonable. For people who can barely afford food? She handed the contract back. No. Crowe's smile tightened. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Is it? He glanced at Rowan. Or is Mr. Hale making it for you? I've heard interesting things about your arrangement. The air went dangerous. You should leave, Rowan said quietly. In a moment. Miss Vance, I'm trying to help you. Without proper licensing, you're vulnerable. The medical board is already building a case. But if you work with me, I can make all of that go away. By selling out, Eliza said. By being realistic. You can't fight the system alone. She's not alone, Rowan said. Crowe looked between them, and something ugly flickered across his face. How touching. The hermit and his purchase, playing at medicine. He turned back to Eliza. You have 1 week to reconsider. After that, the offer expires and the legal proceedings begin. I don't need a week. The answer's no. Crowe's pleasant mask slipped entirely. You're making enemies you can't afford, Miss Vance. Seems like I already made them. Now I'm just deciding not to surrender. Your choice. Crowe mounted his horse smoothly. But choices have consequences. You'll learn that soon enough. He rode away, his men following, leaving a silence that felt like the space before a storm. That's not good, Rowan said. No, it's not. He'll come back, with lawyers probably, maybe marshals. I know. Could make things difficult. Eliza thought about Sarah's breathing, about Thomas's leg, about all the people who'd climbed this mountain desperate and left with hope. Let him try, she said. But that night, lying in bed while Rowan kept watch, she wondered if defiance was enough, wondered what she'd do if Crowe made good on his threats, wondered how many people she'd save before the law caught up and stopped her permanently. The answer started coming 3 days later. A woman arrived, barely conscious, hemorrhaging from a botched surgery. She'd gone to a doctor in Red Hollow, one of Crowe's new hires, she gasped out, and he'd done something wrong, cut something he shouldn't have, and then thrown her out when she couldn't pay his inflated rates. Eliza worked on her for 6 hours, repaired the damage, stopped the bleeding, saved her life. When the woman recovered enough to speak, she told a story that made Eliza's blood run cold. Crowe wasn't just expanding medical services, he was consolidating them, buying up every doctor in the territory, setting rates people couldn't afford, and then, and this was the clever part, offering loans at predatory interest rates for those who couldn't pay. Medicine as extraction, healthcare as a trap. He's got half of Red Hollow in debt already, the woman said, and anyone who complains gets cut off completely. No treatment, not even for dying children. That's monstrous, Eliza said. That's business, at least according to him. After she left, Eliza sat at the table, staring at nothing. Rowan found her there an hour later. You're thinking something dangerous, he observed. I'm thinking we need to do something about Crowe. Like what? I don't know yet, but I can't just sit up here while he turns medicine into a weapon. You start fighting him directly, he'll come after you hard. He's already coming after me. Might as well make it worth his while. Rowan sat down across from her, studied her face. You're sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. You say that a lot. It's been working so far. He almost laughed. Then his expression turned serious. If we do this, if we really push back, it won't be safe anymore. Not up here. Not anywhere. Was it ever safe? Fair point. He stood, started checking his rifle again. All right. We fight. But we fight smart. Nope. No heroics, no stupid risks. Agreed. And Eliza? He met her eyes. Whatever happens, I'm not letting him take you. Not for the board, not for money, not for anything. She felt something shift in her chest, something warm and terrifying and real. I know, she said quietly. And she did. The war started quietly. Eliza began treating anyone who came up the mountain, regardless of ability to pay. Word spread fast. Free clinic, real doctor, better care than anything in Red Hollow. Crowe's patient base started shrinking. He responded by spreading rumors. The woman on the mountain wasn't really a doctor. She was dangerous. She'd killed patients. She practiced unnatural methods. Eliza responded by saving more lives. Crowe tried cutting off her supplies. Eliza learned to improvise. He tried intimidating patients. They came anyway, in the dark, terrified but desperate. The tension built like pressure in a sealed bottle, everyone waiting for something to break. It broke on a cold morning in October. Eliza was treating a child's fever when the first shot rang out, shattering the window above her head. Rowan moved instantly, grabbing her and the child, dragging them both to the floor as more bullets tore through the walls. "Stay down!" he shouted, returning fire through a gun port he'd built into the wall weeks ago, anticipating exactly this. Outside, men were shouting. At least 6, maybe more. Crowe's voice rising above them, giving orders. The siege had begun. And in the chaos, with bullets flying and the child screaming and everything she'd built threatening to collapse into blood and fire, Eliza made a choice. She grabbed her medical bag, checked the child's pulse, and kept working. If they were going to kill her, they'd have to do it while she was saving a life. Because that's who she was now. Not the woman they'd broken in Chicago, not the one they'd sold in Red Hollow. Someone new, someone stronger, someone who refused to stop fighting, no matter what it cost. The child's pulse was steady under Eliza's fingers, even as wood splintered above her head. She forced her breathing to slow, her hands to stop shaking. The fever was breaking, but the boy needed another dose of willow bark tea in 20 minutes, or the infection would surge back. 20 minutes felt like a lifetime when bullets were punching through walls. Rowan fired 3 shots in rapid succession, then ducked back down. They're spreading out, trying to flank us. How many? 8, maybe 9. He reloaded with movements so practiced they looked casual. Crowe's staying back, letting his men do the work. Coward, Eliza muttered. She checked the boy again. His mother had run when the shooting started, bolting out the back door in panic. Smart, probably. The child would have been safer with her if Eliza hadn't needed to keep him still and medicated. Another volley of shots, glass shattered. The stovepipe rang like a bell where a bullet struck it. We can't hold them off forever, Rowan said. He wasn't panicking, just stating facts. I've got ammunition for maybe another hour. After that we improvise. That's not a plan. It's the only one I've got. The shooting stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence, Crowe's voice rang out, cultured and calm. Miss Vance, Mr. Hale, let's be reasonable about this. Rowan's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. I'm not here to hurt anyone, Crowe continued. I simply want what's mine. Miss Vance signed a contract with the medical board. She's operating in violation of that contract. I'm authorized to bring her in for adjudication. Like hell you are, Rowan shouted back. Check the papers I left. It's all legal. She comes willingly. Nobody else gets hurt. She refuses, and I'm authorized to use necessary force. Eliza crawled to where she could see out a crack in the wall. Crowe stood 50 yards back. Immaculate, even after the climb up the mountain, surrounded by hired guns who looked like they'd done this kind of work before. He's lying about the contract, she said. I never signed anything with them, just got blacklisted. Doesn't matter if he's lying. He's got guns. Rowan checked his ammunition count again, his expression grim. And he knows it. You have 1 hour to decide, Crowe called. After that, my men have orders to take you by force. I'd prefer to avoid bloodshed, but I'm prepared for it if necessary. The boy stirred, whimpering. Eliza hushed him gently, checking his temperature. Still too high. He needed that next dose. What do you want to do? Rowan asked quietly. Eliza looked at the child, then at the clinic edition Rowan had built, then at the man who'd bought her freedom and then actually given it to her. I want to tell him to go to hell, she said, but that gets us all killed. Probably. So we need a different approach. I'm listening. She thought fast, her mind working through options the way it worked through surgical procedures, identifying problems, finding solutions, accepting that sometimes the answer was messy and imperfect and would leave scars. How long would it take you to get down to Red Hollow by the back trail? Rowan's eyes narrowed. 3 hours if I push it. Why? Because someone needs to tell people what's happening up here. Thomas, Martha, Dutch, everyone we've helped. Crowe's counting on this being quiet, on nobody knowing he's laying siege to a medical clinic. And you think they'll care? I think some of them will, enough to make noise, maybe even enough to bring the marshal up here to see what's actually happening. That's a lot of maybes. You have a better idea? He didn't. They both knew it. I go down? I leave you here alone with him, Rowan said. With them. I'll manage. Eliza. I'll bar the door. Keep the boy stable. Crowe doesn't actually want me dead. He wants me compliant. There's a difference. She met his eyes. But we need help. Real help. And you're the only one who can get it. Rowan looked like he wanted to argue. Looked like he wanted to refuse. But he'd learned to read her the same way she'd learned to read him. And he saw the steel in her expression. You've got until sunset, he said finally. After that, if I'm not back with help, you run. Take the back trail. Use the cash. Get out. I'm not leaving that boy. Then you take him with you. But you don't stay here and let Crowe win. Rowan, promise me. She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him she'd fight to the last breath, that she'd never surrender, all the brave, stupid things that got people killed. But she looked at his face and saw what this was costing him. Saw him preparing to leave her in danger, to trust that she'd survive, to risk everything on a plan that might not work. I promise, she said. He nodded once, then moved to the back of the cabin where a hidden panel opened onto the steep trail that led down the far side of the mountain. He paused there, rifle in hand, looking back at her. Don't die, he said. You either. Then he was gone, slipping out into the trees like smoke. Eliza barred the door behind him and turned back to find Crowe's men already moving closer. She grabbed the rifle Rowan had left her and fired a warning shot through the broken window. That's close enough, she shouted. The men stopped, retreated slightly, waited. Crowe's voice came again, amused now. Where's your protector, Miss Vance? Abandoned you already? He's getting help. From whom? Everyone in Red Hollow knows better than to cross me. You're alone up here. Maybe he was right. Maybe everyone would decide their debts and their gratitude weren't worth going up against a man like Victor Crowe. Or maybe Rowan would find something in them worth more than fear. Either way, she had to hold out until sunset. The boy woke fully an hour later, confused and frightened. His name was Daniel, he told her through tears. He was 6. His mama had brought him because the coughing wouldn't stop, and the doctor in town said he'd die without expensive medicine they couldn't afford. Am I going to die? He asked, his voice small. Not if I can help it, Eliza said. She gave him the willow bark tea, held the cup while he drank, and kept one eye on the windows where Crowe's men were visible, waiting. Why are those men shooting at us? Because they're angry I'm helping you. Daniel processed this with the absolute logic of children. That's stupid. Yes, it is. My mama says stupid people are dangerous. Your mama's right. They sat in silence while bullets occasionally thunked into the walls, more harassment than serious assault. Crowe was playing a waiting game, wearing her down, making her afraid. It was working, but Eliza had learned a long time ago that being afraid didn't mean you stopped functioning. She checked Daniel's lungs again, clearing nicely. Changed the bandage on a scrape he'd gotten climbing up the mountain. Talked to him about nothing important, keeping him calm, keeping herself calm. Miss, Daniel said after a while. Yes? Are you scared? Terrified. Me too. That's all right. Scared just means we know we're in danger. Means we're smart enough to be careful. Mr. Rowan says that too, about being scared. Eliza smiled despite everything. Mr. Rowan's a wise man. Is he your husband? The question caught her off guard. No. But you live together. Yes. And you help people together. Yes. Then you're married. That's what married means. The simple certainty of it made something twist in Eliza's chest. She thought about Rowan building the clinic, about his hand steadying hers during difficult procedures, about the way he'd looked at her that night under the stars and told her she'd reminded him how to care about tomorrow. "Maybe we are," she said quietly. Another hour crawled past. The sun tracked across the sky with agonizing slowness. Crowe tried negotiating twice more, his offers getting progressively less generous as his patience wore thin. "Last chance, Miss Vance. Come out now, and I'll guarantee your safety. Make me come in there, and I can't promise anything." Eliza didn't bother responding, just kept Daniel comfortable and watched the light change. When the shooting started again in earnest, she knew Crowe's patience had finally run out. Bullets tore through the walls systematically, a pattern designed to make the cabin uninhabitable. Daniel screamed. Eliza pulled him under the heavy table Rowan had built, covered him with her body, and prayed to nobody in particular that the wood would hold. It mostly did. But a ricochet caught her left arm, tearing through muscle and leaving a burning line of agony. Eliza bit down on her scream, pressed cloth against the wound, and kept herself between Daniel and the incoming fire. This was it. This was where Crowe made his move. She heard men approaching the door, heard them testing the bar, heard Crowe giving orders. "Burn it," he said, clear as day. "Smoke them out." The smell of coal oil hit her nose seconds before she saw the flames. They were setting the clinic on fire. Eliza looked at Daniel's terrified face, felt blood seeping through the makeshift bandage on her arm, and knew she was out of time. Rowan wasn't back. Help wasn't coming. She had maybe 2 minutes before the smoke got bad enough to kill them both. She grabbed her medical bag with her good hand, pulled Daniel to his feet, and made for the back exit Rowan had used. Behind them, the clinic burned. They stumbled out into the fading daylight, Eliza half dragging Daniel, her arms screaming. Crowe's men were waiting, of course. They'd covered both exits. 6 rifles pointed at her head. "Enough," Crowe said, stepping forward. He looked at the burning clinic with something that might have been regret. "Such a waste. You could have had everything, Miss Vance. Instead, you chose this." "I chose not to be owned," Eliza said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "There's a difference." "Is there?" He gestured, and one of his men grabbed Daniel, yanking the boy away from her. Daniel screamed, reaching for Eliza. "Leave him alone," she snarled. "Or what? You'll shoot me with a gun you're not holding?" Crowe smiled. "You've lost, Miss Vance. Accept it with dignity." One of his men grabbed her arms, both of them, including the injured one. Eliza couldn't stop the cry of pain. Crowe frowned at the blood. "You're hurt." "Your men shot me." "Unfortunate. We'll get that treated once we're back in Red Hollow." He said it like he was doing her a favor. "You'll find I'm not unreasonable. Work with me and you'll have everything you need. Except freedom. Freedom is overrated. Security is what matters." He turned to give orders to his men, clearly considering the matter settled. That's when the first shot rang out from the tree line. One of Crowe's men dropped, clutching his leg. Then another shot, another man down. Crowe spun, shouting orders, his men scrambling for cover. And out of the forest came Rowan, flanked by Thomas Riker and Martha Connolly and Dutch Carrier and at least 20 others, all armed, all furious, all moving with the coordinated purpose of people who'd decided enough was enough. "Let her go," Rowan said. His rifle was aimed square at Crowe's chest. "This is a legal matter," Crowe blustered. "You're interfering with what? An illegal siege? Arson? Attempted kidnapping?" A new voice cut through the chaos. A man in a marshal's badge stepped forward, his expression carved from granite. "I'd be real interested to hear your legal justification for all that, Mr. Crowe." Crowe went pale. "Marshal Preston, I can explain—" "Save it!" Preston looked at the burning clinic, at Eliza's bloodied arm, at Daniel crying in one of the hired gun's grip. "Release the boy. Drop your weapons. You're all under arrest." "On what charge?" "How about we start with assault and work our way up to attempted murder?" Preston's hand rested on his own gun. "Your men can comply, or they can explain themselves to a judge. Their choice." There was a long, tense moment where it could have gone either way. Then one of Crowe's men dropped his rifle. Then another. Then the rest, seeing which way the wind was blowing, followed suit. The man holding Daniel let him go. The boy ran straight to Eliza, who caught him with her good arm and held on tight. Rowan was there seconds later, checking her over with the hands that shook slightly. "You're hit," he said. "I noticed. Told you not to die." Told you the same thing. She leaned into him, exhausted and hurting and alive. You got them to come. Wasn't hard. Turns out people don't like men who burn down clinics. He looked at the ruined building, something raw crossing his face. I'm sorry, I should have been faster. You were fast enough. She touched his face with her good hand. We're alive. That's what matters. Marshal Preston approached, his expression softening slightly when he saw Eliza's wound. Ma'am, you need medical attention. I'm a doctor. That's what they tell me. Also tells me you're operating without a license. Eliza's stomach dropped. Here it came. The arrest, the charges, the end of everything she'd built. But Preston surprised her, which in normal circumstances would be a problem. But seeing as the only licensed doctor in 50 miles is currently in my custody for attempted murder, I'm inclined to overlook that particular technicality. He glanced at the gathered townspeople, especially given how many folks seem to think you saved their lives. She did, Thomas said firmly. Saved mine. Would have lost my leg otherwise. Saved my Sarah, Martha added, when no one else would even try. One by one, the others spoke up. Stories of fevers broken, injuries healed, children saved, a chorus of testimony that painted a picture Preston couldn't ignore. Well then, the marshal said, seems to me justice would be better served going after the man who tried to burn you alive than the woman who's been keeping people breathing. He fixed Crowe with a hard stare. Wouldn't you agree? Crowe's face had gone from pale to flushed. This is outrageous. I have connections. Lawyers. You can't just... I can and I am. You're going to sit in a cell in Red Hollow until the circuit judge arrives. Then you're going to explain to him why you thought you had the right to attempt murder in my territory. Preston gestured to his deputies. Take them down. All of them. As Crowe was led away in chains, still sputtering about injustice and rights and connections, Eliza felt something in her chest unclenched for the first time in hours. Daniel's mother arrived then, running up the trail, sobbing with relief when she found her son alive. She swept him into her arms, crying and thanking Eliza over and over until the words blurred together. We need to look at that arm, Rowan said quietly. Later. First I need to... Eliza looked at the burning clinic, at everything they'd built going up in smoke. We'll rebuild, Rowan said, reading her mind like he always did. Better this time. Bigger. Proper surgery space like you wanted. With what money? With theirs. Martha stepped forward. We've been talking, all of us. You saved our lives, never charged a cent. Time we returned the favor. I don't want charity. Not charity, investment. Thomas grinned. We build you a proper clinic. You keep fixing us when we break. Fair trade. Dutch carrier nodded. I've got timber. Martha can organize labor. Between all of us, we'll have you a building that'd make Chicago jealous. Eliza looked at their faces, these people she'd helped, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real hope. The kind that wasn't naive or foolish, but built on something solid. All right, she said, but I'm helping build it. With one working arm? Rowan raised an eyebrow. I'll supervise. That's what I'm afraid of. They got her arm treated. Martha turned out to have steady hands, and Eliza talked her through cleaning and stitching the wound. It hurt like hell, but it would heal clean. By the time the sun set completely, the fire had burned itself out, leaving the clinic a skeleton of charred timber and ash. But the cabin itself had been saved, and with it, most of Eliza's medical supplies. The crowd dispersed slowly, heading back down the mountain with promises to return and help rebuild. Marshal Preston stayed long enough to take statements, his notepad filling with accounts of everything Crowe had done. You'll need to testify, he told Eliza. Circuit judge will want to hear it directly from you. Will Crowe's lawyers be a problem? They'll try, but I've got 24 witnesses, a burned building, and your injury. That's a hard case to argue against. Preston tipped his hat. You did good work up here, ma'am. Would be a shame to see it end. After he left, it was just Eliza and Rowan standing in the ruins. We could leave, Rowan said. Find somewhere else. Start over where Crowe's people can't reach. We could, Eliza agreed, but we won't. Why not? Because for the first time in my life, I'm not running. She looked at him. Because you built me a clinic, and I want to use it. Because those people down there need someone who gives a damn whether they live or die. Because She stopped, the words catching. Because what? Because this is home, she said quietly. This impossible, dangerous, beautiful place. It's home. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled her close, carefully, mindful of her injury, and held her like she was something precious. Yeah, he said against her hair. It is. They stood like that until the cold drove them inside, into the cabin that had survived, into the space they'd carved out together against all odds. And when Rowan kissed her, it wasn't dramatic or desperate. It was simple and true, like everything between them had become. A promise made without words, a future chosen deliberately. Two people who'd been broken by the world, deciding to be whole together. That night, they made plans, drew sketches for the new clinic by lamplight, argued about room layouts and supply storage and how big the surgery needed to be. Fell asleep at the table, exhausted, Rowan's hand covering hers. When morning came, Thomas and Martha returned with others. Lumber started arriving. Foundation stones were laid. The rebuilding had begun. And 3 weeks later, when the circuit judge arrived in Red Hollow and convened court, Eliza stood before him in her cleanest dress and told the truth. All of it. About Chicago. About the blacklist. About building a practice that helped anyone who needed it. About Crowe's threats and siege and attempted murder. Crowe's lawyers argued, called her unlicensed, unqualified, a danger to public safety. But the judge listened to the testimonies, saw the medical records Eliza had meticulously kept, heard from patient after patient who'd been saved when no one else would help. And when he delivered his verdict, the courtroom went dead silent. Mr. Crowe, you are found guilty of attempted murder, arson, conspiracy, and a dozen other charges I don't have time to enumerate. You'll serve no less than 15 years hard labor. He fixed Crowe with a disgusted stare. You tried to kill a woman for the crime of saving lives. That's not justice. That's not even business. That's just evil. Crowe was led away in chains, his empire already crumbling as investors fled and patients demanded refunds. Then the judge turned to Eliza. Miss Vance, you've operated without a license. Under normal circumstances, that would carry penalties. Eliza braced herself. However, the judge's stern expression cracked slightly. These aren't normal circumstances. You've provided essential medical care in an underserved area. You've saved lives. And from what I can tell, you've done it better than most licensed physicians I've encountered. He paused. I'm recommending to the Territorial Medical Board that you be granted a provisional license, pending formal examination. In the meantime, you're authorized to continue your practice under my authority. The courtroom erupted. People cheered. Martha sobbed with joy. Eliza just stood there, stunned, until Rowan's hand found hers and squeezed. You did it, he said quietly. We did it, she corrected. Outside the courthouse, people crowded around to congratulate her, to thank her, to tell her the new clinic was almost finished and would she please come see what they'd built. It was better than anything she could have imagined, larger, better equipped, with a real surgery and separate recovery rooms and windows that let in light and air. We figured you'd be here a while, Dutch said, grinning. Might as well be comfortable. That night, back on the mountain, with the new clinic rising beside the cabin, Eliza and Rowan sat outside watching stars. You gonna take that examination? He asked. Probably should. Make it official. Think you'll pass? I've been cutting people open and putting them back together for 10 years. If I don't pass, the examination's broken. He laughed, actually laughed, deep and genuine. What? She asked. Nothing. Just thinking about the woman on that auction block. How angry she looked. How scared. He pulled her closer. Look at you now. Still angry, still scared. But not alone. No, she agreed, leaning into him. Not alone. The mountains rose around them, dark and eternal. Somewhere in the valley, people slept easier knowing help was just a climb away. And in the cabin, two people who'd survived everything the world could throw at them held each other and chose deliberately and completely to keep surviving together. The battle was won. But the real work was just beginning. The trial's aftermath spread through the territory like ripples in still water, reaching places Eliza had never been, and touching people she'd never met. News of Crowe's conviction traveled fast. A wealthy Eastern businessman, brought down by a woman doctor operating out of a mountain cabin, made for the kind of story people repeated over campfires and in saloons. But with the attention came complications Eliza hadn't anticipated. The first sign arrived 2 months after the verdict, carried up the mountain by a well-dressed lawyer named Harrison Webb. He was younger than Crowe, smoother, and his smile never quite reached his eyes. "Miss Vance," he said, standing in the doorway of the new clinic like he had every right to be there. "I represent the estate of Victor Crowe." Eliza was stitching up a rancher's hand, didn't look up. "He's not dead. Estates are for dead people." "True, but Mr. Crowe's business interests are being liquidated to pay restitution to his victims. I'm here to discuss settlement terms." "Not interested?" "You haven't heard the offer." "Don't need to." She tied off the last suture, inspected her work. "Tell your client to keep his money." "I don't want it." Webb's smile tightened. "Miss Vance, you were a victim of attempted murder. You're entitled to compensation, significant compensation. What I'm entitled to is being left alone to do my work." The rancher, a man named Pete Sullivan, watched this exchange with interest. His hand was wrapped neatly now, the deep gash from a broken saw blade cleaned and closed. "Give it 3 days," Eliza told him. "Change the dressing twice daily. If you see red streaks or smell anything foul, come back immediately." "Yes, ma'am." Pete stood, fumbled for coins. "Put that away. You brought me fresh venison last week. We're square." "That wasn't payment. That was just being neighborly." "Then this is just being neighborly back." Pete grinned, tipped his hat to Webb with considerably less friendliness, and left. Webb waited until he was gone. "You're not charging patients? Is that illegal now? It's impractical. You could be making a fortune up here. People would pay." "Some would. Some can't. I'm not interested in sorting them into categories." Eliza started cleaning her instruments, the familiar routine grounding her. "If you're here to offer money, the answer's no. If you're here to threaten me with something, get to it so I can throw you out." "I'm not here to threaten." Webb pulled out a document. "I'm here to inform you that several of Mr. Crowe's former associates are contesting the verdict. They claim bias, improper procedure, judicial overreach." Eliza's hand stilled. "They're appealing?" "They're attempting to. It likely won't succeed, but the process could take years, during which time you may face additional scrutiny, questions about your credentials, your methods, your right to practice. Let them question. I passed the territorial examination." "Barely." That stung because it was true. The examination had been brutal, designed by men who resented being forced to test a woman. She'd passed, but only just, and the examining physicians had made it clear they considered it a technicality. "Is there a point to this visit?" Eliza asked coldly. "Except the settlement. It comes with a legal release." His associates agreed to drop all challenges in exchange for you accepting compensation and signing a non-disparagement clause. Meaning I can't talk about what he did. Meaning you can move forward without constant legal harassment. You could build a real practice, Miss Vance, buy proper equipment, maybe even expand beyond this mountain. "I like this mountain." "Do you? Or is it just the only place desperate enough to accept you?" The words hit like a physical blow. Eliza set down the scalpel she was cleaning before she did something she'd regret. "Get out." "Miss Vance, out. Now, before I demonstrate exactly how sharp my instruments are." Webb had the sense to leave quickly, but his parting words echoed in the empty clinic. "Desperate enough to accept you." Rowan found her an hour later, still standing at the instrument table, her hands shaking slightly. "Saw the lawyer leaving," he said. "Looked unhappy." "Good." "What do you want?" Eliza told him. All of it, including the part that had burrowed under her skin and festered. Rowan listened without interrupting, his expression darkening as she spoke. "You know he's wrong," he said when she finished. "Is he?" "Look around, Rowan. This is all I've got. A clinic in the middle of nowhere, serving people who can't afford real doctors. Maybe he's right. Maybe this is just—" "Stop!" Rowan's voice was sharp enough to cut through her spiral. "You know what you've built here. You know what you've done. Don't let some snake in a suit make you forget." "I'm not forgetting. I'm just—" She gestured helplessly. "Tired. Of fighting. Of defending myself. Of always having to prove I deserve to exist." Rowan crossed to her, took her hands in his. "Then stop proving it. You don't owe anyone justification. You're here, you're helping people, that's enough. Is it? For me, it is. He kissed her forehead. For everyone you've saved, it is. And if it's not enough for some lawyer trying to make his commission, that's his problem. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let it go and move on. But that night, lying awake while Rowan slept, Eliza couldn't stop hearing Webb's words, couldn't stop wondering if he was right. The doubt ate at her for weeks. She kept working. There was always someone who needed help, always another crisis demanding her attention. But the joy had leaked out of it somehow, replaced by a grinding sense of inadequacy. Martha noticed first. "You're different," she said bluntly one afternoon. She'd brought Sarah in for a regular checkup, the girl healthy and bright-eyed and completely recovered from the pneumonia that had nearly killed her. "I'm fine." "You're not. You're distracted, snapping at people. What's wrong?" Eliza wanted to deny it, but Martha had become something close to a friend over the months, and lying felt wrong. "Just thinking about the future," she said carefully. "Whether this is sustainable long-term." "The clinic? Why wouldn't it be?" "Because I'm one person. I can't be here all the time, can't help everyone who needs it. What happens when I get sick or injured or just—" She stopped, struggling for words. "What happens when I'm not enough?" Martha studied her with an expression that suggested she saw more than Eliza wanted to reveal. "You know what your problem is?" Martha said. "You think you have to be everything to everyone, but that's not how this works." "Then how does it work?" "You train someone, pass on what you know. Build something bigger than just you." The idea had never occurred to Eliza. Train someone. Create another doctor where none existed. Who would I train? There's no medical school within 500 miles. So start one, small scale, and take on apprentices like they used to do. Martha warmed to the idea. There's got to be someone out here smart enough to learn, someone who wants to help people but can't afford fancy schools back east. It was insane. Ambitious beyond anything Eliza had considered. It was also brilliant. "I'll think about it," she said. But Martha just smiled. "You're already thinking about it. I can see it in your face." She was right. That night Eliza broached the subject with Rowan. "What do you think about expanding?" she asked. They were in the cabin, Rowan carving another wooden bird while she reviewed her medical notes. The routine had become comfortable, domestic in a way that still surprised her sometimes. "Expanding how?" "Training others. Teaching them what I know. Building a program for people who want to learn medicine but can't access traditional schools." Rowan's knife stilled. "That's ambitious. Is it crazy?" "Probably, but most good ideas are." He set down his carving. "You think people would come?" "I think there are probably plenty of people like me out here. Smart, capable, but locked out of the system because they're the wrong gender or class or just too poor to afford it. You'd need space, resources, time." "I know, which is why it's probably impossible. Or," Rowan said slowly, "it's exactly what this place needs." They talked late into the night, sketching plans and possibilities. By dawn, they had the bones of something workable. A teaching clinic. Small at first, maybe 2 or 3 students. Room and board in exchange for work. Hands-on training supplemented by whatever medical texts Eliza could acquire. Graduates would be equipped to set up their own practices in underserved areas, spreading medical care like seeds across the territory. It was ambitious and probably doomed, and Eliza wanted it more than she'd wanted anything in years. The first challenge was finding students. Eliza put the word out through her patients, asking if anyone knew young people interested in learning medicine. The responses ranged from enthusiastic to horrified, depending on who she asked. The first applicant showed up 3 weeks later. Her name was Rachel Morrison, 19 years old, with clever eyes and hands scarred from years of ranch work. She'd ridden 2 days to reach the clinic, carrying a letter of introduction from Dutch Carrier. "He says you saved his shoulder," Rachel said. "Says you're the best doctor he's ever seen, and he's seen plenty." Dutch exaggerates. "Maybe, but I've wanted to learn medicine since I was 12 and saw my brother die from an infection any competent doctor could have treated." Rachel's jaw set. "I'm not letting that happen to anyone else if I can help it." Eliza recognized that expression, had seen it in the mirror often enough. "You know this won't be easy," she said. "Long hours, hard work, and at the end you'll have a skill most people think women shouldn't possess." Sounds perfect. You'll be assisting with surgeries, dealing with blood, with people in pain, with death when we can't save them. I've butchered cattle. I've set bones on horses. I'm not squeamish. And if you complete the training, you'll face the same prejudice I have. People who think you're lying about your abilities, who'd rather die than let a woman treat them. Then they can die, Rachel said bluntly. I'll help the ones who want to live. Eliza couldn't help it. She smiled. When can you start? Now. The second student arrived a month later. His name was James Chen, 23, the son of Chinese immigrants who'd worked themselves to death building the railroad. He'd taught himself to read through sheer determination and had been working as a medic in mining camps, treating injuries with whatever supplies he could scrounge. I'm not formally educated, he said carefully, and I know some people won't want to be treated by someone who knows what they're doing, Eliza interrupted. That's their loss. Can you learn? I've been learning my whole life. Can you work hard? Harder than anyone you've met? Then welcome. With 2 students came new challenges. The clinic had to be reorganized, sleeping quarters established, a curriculum developed. Eliza found herself working harder than ever, but differently now, not just treating patients, but teaching others how to treat them. Rachel proved brilliant with diagnosis, her sharp mind cutting through symptoms to find root causes. James had a surgeon's hand, steady and precise even under pressure. Together, they pushed Eliza to articulate knowledge she'd previously operated on instinct, forcing her to break down procedures into steps someone else could follow. It was exhausting and exhilarating and occasionally terrifying when she realized how much trust these young people placed in her. 3 months into the program, they got their first real test. A mining accident in the valley sent 7 injured men up the mountain, all needing immediate treatment. Crushed limbs, internal injuries, burns from an explosion. Eliza looked at the carnage and knew she couldn't handle it alone. Rachel, you take the burns, she said, her voice calm despite the chaos. Clean them, dress them, watch for infection. James, there's a compound fracture on that one. You know the procedure. I'll handle the internal bleeding. For a second, both students froze, fear flickering across their faces. Then Rachel grabbed supplies and moved. James did the same. And for the next 6 hours, the clinic became a battlefield where 3 doctors fought death to a standstill. They saved 5 out of 7, lost 2 despite everything they tried. Afterwards, sitting outside in the dark, covered in blood and exhausted beyond words, Rachel spoke first. I didn't think I could do it, she said quietly. When I saw how bad it was, I thought I'd freeze. But you didn't, Eliza said, because you trusted me to handle it. Rachel looked at her. How did you know I could? I didn't, but you needed to find out, and they needed help. Sometimes that's enough. James was silent, staring at his hands, the hands that had set bones and sutured wounds and tried desperately to save a man whose injuries were too severe. The ones we lost, he said. That doesn't get easier, does it? No, Eliza said honestly. It doesn't. You just learn to carry it better. They sat together while the mountain wind sang around them, 3 people bound by the weight of what they'd done and failed to do. Rowan found them there an hour later. He'd been helping organize the survivors, getting them shelter and food. Town's asking for you, he told Eliza. Want to thank you for saving their people. I didn't, we did. She gestured at Rachel and James. They're as much doctors as I am now. The look of pride that crossed both students' faces made every sleepless night worth it. Word of the teaching clinic spread. More applications arrived. Some Eliza accepted, most she didn't. By the end of the year, she had 5 students, ranging from 17 to 25, all hungry to learn and willing to work. The clinic expanded again. Rowan built dormitories, then a dedicated surgery wing, then a library where Eliza's growing collection of medical texts could be housed and studied. What had started as one woman trying to survive became an institution, but success brought new enemies. The letter arrived on a cold January morning, delivered by federal marshal. Different from Marshal Preston, harder-faced and considerably less sympathetic. It was from the American Medical Association, signed by a dozen prominent physicians. They were challenging the Territorial Medical Board's decision to license Eliza, calling it illegal, improper, an affront to professional standards. They demanded her license be revoked immediately and her teaching clinic shut down. Eliza read it twice, her hands steady, but her heart racing. "They can't do this," Rachel said, reading over her shoulder. "You passed the examination. You've saved hundreds of lives. They can try, and they've got resources I don't. So we fight them. With what? I barely scraped together enough to keep this place running. They've got lawyers, political connections, the weight of every medical school in the country." "You've got us," James said. All 5 students had gathered, their faces set with determination, and everyone you've ever helped. That might not be enough. Then we make it enough. The fight that followed made Crowe's assault look simple by comparison. The AMA sent investigators to interview Eliza's patients, looking for complaints or evidence of malpractice. They found none, or rather, they found testimonials so glowing they seemed fabricated, except they weren't. They challenged the validity of the territorial examination, claiming it was administered improperly. Marshal Preston himself had to testify about the circumstances, his voice dripping with contempt for the investigators. They questioned Eliza's methods, her training, her right to teach others, demanded access to her medical records, her curriculum, her patient outcomes. Eliza provided everything they asked for, because she had nothing to hide. Every surgery documented, every patient followed up. Success rates that matched or exceeded most hospitals back east, achieved with a fraction of the resources. The investigators tried to find fault, tried to twist the data, tried to build a case that would justify shutting her down. But the numbers didn't lie. The hearing was held in Denver, requiring Eliza to make a 3-day journey and leave her clinic in the student's care. Rowan came with her, silent support that kept her grounded when the pressure threatened to crush her. The courtroom was packed. Representatives from the AMA sat on one side, looking smug and certain. On the other side sat patients who'd traveled hundreds of miles to testify, teachers who'd donated books, townspeople who'd built the clinic with their own hands. The AMA's lawyer was everything Eliza expected, polished, confident, dismissive. "Miss Vance represents everything wrong with frontier medicine," he declared. "Untrained practitioners putting lives at risk, teaching others to do the same. We're not here to persecute her. We're here to protect the public." "From what?" The judge, a woman named Catherine Brennan, looked skeptical. "From a doctor with a better survival rate than most of your member institutions? From someone operating outside accepted standards. I've reviewed her records. Her standards appear quite rigorous." Judge Brennan glanced at Eliza. "Miss Vance, you'll have your chance to respond." Eliza stood, smoothed her skirt, looked at the assembled doctors who'd come to destroy what she'd built. "I'm not here to apologize," she said. "I learned medicine the same way every doctor before the 1800s learned it, through apprenticeship, observation, and practice. I passed your examination. I've treated over 300 patients in 18 months with a mortality rate of less than 3%. I've trained 5 students who are already saving lives in their own right." Without proper oversight, the AMA lawyer began. Oversight from whom? Men who've never set foot in the territories? Who don't understand the realities of frontier medicine? Who think it's better for people to die than be treated by someone without the right pedigree? That's not what we're saying. Then what are you saying? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're more concerned with protecting your monopoly than protecting patients. The courtroom erupted. Judge Brennan called for order. The testimonies took 3 days. Patient after patient describing injuries healed, illnesses cured, lives saved. Rachel and James both testified about their training, demonstrating knowledge that impressed even the hostile doctors. Dutch Carrier testified about his shoulder, Martha about Sarah's pneumonia, Thomas Riker about his leg. On the 3rd day, the AMA lawyer made his closing argument. "We don't dispute that Miss Vance has helped people, but that doesn't make her qualified to practice medicine, and it certainly doesn't give her the right to train others. Standards exist for a reason. Relaxing them, even with good intentions, puts everyone at risk." Judge Brennan turned to Eliza. "Your response?" Eliza had prepared a speech, had practiced it with Rowan, refined it until every word was perfect. She threw it away. "You want to know what puts people at risk?" she said. "Dying because the nearest licensed doctor is 3 days away and charges more than you make in a year. Dying because medical schools won't admit women or poor people or anyone who doesn't fit their narrow definition of acceptable. dying because the system cares more about credentials than competence. She looked at each doctor on the AMA's side. I'm not asking you to lower your standards. I'm asking you to recognize that different places need different solutions. The territories don't have hospitals or medical schools. They have people who get hurt and sick and need help. I'm providing that help, and I'm teaching others to do the same. If that threatens you, maybe you should ask why. The silence that followed felt like held breath. Judge Brennan deliberated for 2 hours. When she returned, her expression gave nothing away. I've reviewed the evidence, she said, the testimonies, the medical records, the examination results, and I've reached a conclusion. Eliza's hand found Rowan's under the table. The AMA's challenge is denied. Miss Vance's license stands. Her teaching clinic is authorized to continue operation under territorial jurisdiction. Brennan fixed the AMA's lawyers with a hard stare. Furthermore, I'm recommending that the territorial government establish formal guidelines for medical training programs like Miss Vance's. The frontier needs doctors. She's creating them. The only question is whether you'll help or hinder. The courtroom exploded again, but this time with cheers. Eliza sat down hard, shaking. Rowan's arm came around her shoulders. You did it, he said quietly. We did it. The victory was sweet but incomplete. The AMA lawyers left promising appeals, future challenges, continued resistance, but Eliza had won the battle that mattered: the right to exist, the right to practice, the right to teach. The journey back to the mountain took 4 days. When they finally crested the last ridge and saw the clinic complex spread below, buildings, students, patients waiting, Eliza felt something settle in her chest. This was hers. Not because she'd bought it or inherited it or been given it, because she'd built it from nothing, defended it against everything, and refused to let anyone take it away. Rachel met them at the door, grinning. We handled 17 patients while you were gone. 2 surgeries, 1 complicated birth. Everyone survived. Any problems? Just the usual. Oh, and we got 6 new applications for the training program. 6? News of the hearing spread. People heard you won and they want in. Eliza looked at Rowan, saw her own wonder reflected in his face. Then I guess we're expanding again, she said. That night, sitting outside with Rowan, watching lights in the clinic windows where students studied late, Eliza finally let herself feel it. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of purpose. You know this won't end, Rowan said. They'll keep coming after you, finding new ways to challenge what you've built. I know. And you're okay with that? She thought about the auction block in Red Hollow, about being purchased and discarded and told she was worthless, about climbing this mountain as a last resort and finding something she'd never expected. Home. Purpose. Love. Yeah, she said. I'm okay with that. Because this time, she wasn't fighting alone. She had students who believed in her, patients who trusted her, a community that had literally built her dreams with their own hands. And she had Rowan, who'd seen her at her worst and chosen her anyway. The war with the AMA would continue. Other challenges would come. But Eliza had learned something crucial over these hard months. She didn't need their approval to do good work. She just needed to keep doing it. The expansion happened faster than Eliza had imagined possible. Within 6 months of the Denver hearing, the teaching clinic had grown from 5 students to 12, with a waiting list that stretched into the following year. Rachel had graduated, if you could call it that, since there was no formal ceremony, just Eliza handing her a certificate she'd written herself and telling her she was ready. Rachel had immediately set up practice in a mining town 40 miles south, writing back weekly with questions and updates and a gratitude that made Eliza's throat tight. James was close behind, his surgical skills now rivaling Eliza's own. He'd started specializing in the kind of traumatic injuries common in railroad work, developing techniques that were being noticed even by establishment doctors who'd initially dismissed him. But success had a cost Eliza was only beginning to understand. She was in the surgery one afternoon teaching a new student named Caroline how to properly debride a wound when the pain hit. Sharp, stealing her breath, radiating from her lower abdomen with an intensity that made her grip the table edge. Dr. Vance? Caroline's voice seemed to come from far away. I'm fine. The words came out through gritted teeth. Just finish the procedure. Watch the angle of your scalpel. But she wasn't fine. The pain came again, worse this time, and Eliza recognized it with the cold clarity of her medical training. Internal bleeding, Probably her appendix, possibly something worse. She managed to finish supervising the procedure, get the patient settled, and dismiss Caroline before the next wave hit hard enough to double her over. James found her 10 minutes later sitting on the floor of the surgery, her face gray. "Get Rowan," she said, "and prepare the surgery. I need another wave of pain. I need you to operate." James went pale. "Dr. Vance, I can't." "You can and you will. I'll talk you through it." She tried to stand, couldn't. "But we need to move fast." Rowan arrived within minutes, his face going white when he saw her. "What happened?" "Appendix rupture, probably. Maybe ovarian cyst. Won't know until James opens me up." She looked at her student, saw the terror in his eyes. "You've done this procedure 6 times. You know the anatomy. You can do this." "Not on you," James said, his voice shaking. "Especially on me. Because I trust you more than any surgeon in Denver." She gripped his hand. "And because if you don't, I'll die. So let's not waste time being scared." They got her on the table. Caroline assisted, her hand steadier than James's. Rowan refused to leave, standing at Eliza's head, holding her hand while James administered chloroform. "Don't let me die," Eliza said, looking up at Rowan. The words were light, almost joking, but her eyes were serious. "Not a chance," Rowan said. His voice didn't shake, but his hand did. "And if I do, you won't. But if I do, the clinic continues. The students finish their training. You don't let this place fall apart just because I'm gone. Eliza, promise me." He leaned down, kissed her forehead. "I promise. Now stop talking like you're dying and let James save you." The chloroform took her under before she could respond. She woke to pain and dim light and Rowan's face hovering above hers. "Am I alive?" Her voice came out as a croak. "Very much so." The relief in his expression was almost painful to see. "James removed your appendix. It had already ruptured, but he got it before the infection spread. He says you'll be fine." "Where is he?" "Outside. Throwing up, last I checked. Fear and adrenaline finally caught up." Eliza tried to laugh, regretted it immediately as pain lanced through her abdomen. "He did good? He saved your life. I'd say that qualifies as good." Over the next week, as she recovered in the bed she'd made dozens of patients rest in, Eliza had time to think. About mortality. About what would happen to this place if she wasn't here. About the fact that she'd built something bigger than herself but hadn't actually prepared for what that meant. Rachel came back to help manage things while Eliza healed, bringing with her a confidence that was new. She'd been practicing for 6 months and had already built a reputation in her mining town. "You were right," Rachel told her one evening. "About it being hard. About people doubting me. But you were also right about pushing through anyway." "How many have you lost?" Eliza asked. It was the question doctors asked each other, the one that mattered more than success stories. 3. A mining accident I couldn't stop. A child with scarlet fever. A man who came to me too late with gangrene. Rachel's expression was older now, marked by the weight of those losses. "I keep their names written down. Remember each one." "Good. The day you stop remembering is the day you should quit. Do you remember yours?" "Every single one." Eliza shifted, trying to find a position that didn't hurt. 23, counting the ones from Chicago. "I can tell you their names, what killed them, what I tried that didn't work." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 doctors bound by the same scars. "The clinic needs a succession plan," Rachel said finally. "If something happens to you, I know, I've been thinking about it. And I'm making you and James co-directors. You'll oversee training, manage operations, make the decisions I've been making." Rachel looked stunned. "Dr. Vance, I've only been practicing for 6 months, during which you've saved 30-some lives and built a practice from nothing. You're ready. More importantly, this place needs to be bigger than me, needs to survive regardless of whether I'm here." "You're planning to leave?" "I'm planning to live, but I'm also planning for the possibility that I won't." Eliza met her eyes. "This matters too much to depend on one person. Even me." The conversation with James went similarly, though he took more convincing. But eventually he agreed, and Eliza drew up papers making it official. The clinic became an institution with actual structure, actual leadership beyond her. It felt like letting go, like acknowledging her own mortality, like growing up in a way she'd been avoiding. It felt necessary. By the time Eliza was back on her feet, autumn had arrived, and with it, unexpected news. The territorial governor wanted to visit. He says he's interested in the teaching clinic model, the messenger explained. Wants to see if it can be replicated elsewhere in the territory. Eliza exchanged glances with Rowan. This feels like a trap. Probably is. Question is whether it's worth walking into. The governor arrived 3 weeks later with an entourage that included territorial medical officials, education administrators, and enough bureaucrats to make Eliza's head spin. Governor Samuel Hartley was in his 50s, with the kind of political smile that could mean anything or nothing. Dr. Vance, he said, shaking her hand firmly, I've heard remarkable things about your work. Most of them probably exaggerated. I doubt that. May I see the facilities? She showed him everything. The surgery, the dormitories, the library that now held over 200 medical texts donated from across the country. She introduced him to students, let him watch a procedure, showed him patient records that documented success rates. Hartley took it all in with an expression that gave nothing away. Impressive, he said finally. They were in Eliza's office, a small room that had once been storage. You've created something genuinely innovative here. Thank you. Which is why I'm here to make you an offer. Here it comes, Eliza thought, the catch. The territory is growing. We need more doctors, more medical infrastructure. Your model works. I want to fund expansion. 3 more teaching clinics in different regions, all under your oversight. Full territorial support, legal protection, guaranteed funding. It was everything she could have wanted, everything she'd fought for. In exchange for what? Eliza asked. Hartley smiled. Smart question. In exchange for oversight. The clinics would operate under territorial medical authority, standardized curriculum, regular inspections, licensed instructors only. Meaning I'd need to bring in establishment doctors. Meaning we'd need to ensure quality control. Surely you see the value in that. Eliza saw exactly what it meant. Saw the establishment getting their hooks into what she'd built. Saw oversight becoming control, standards becoming restrictions, everything she'd created getting smoothed down until it fit into their comfortable boxes. I need to think about it, she said. Of course. Take your time. Within reason. After he left, Eliza called a meeting with Rachel, James, and her other advanced students, laid out the governor's offer, watched their reactions. It's a lot of money, James said carefully. Could do a lot of good. Could also destroy everything we've built, Rachel countered. The moment we accept territorial authority, we lose independence, lose the ability to make our own decisions. But we'd also gain legitimacy, another student pointed out. Protection from challenges like the AMAs. They argued for hours. Valid points on all sides. No clear answer. Finally, Eliza held up her hand for silence. I need to ask you all something. Why are you here? Not just physically, but why did you choose this path? Rachel spoke first. Because traditional medical schools wouldn't take me. This was my only option. Because I wanted to help my community and couldn't afford formal education, James added. One by one, the others shared their stories, all variations on the same theme, people locked out by the system, finding a different path forward. That's why this place exists, Eliza said quietly. Not to compete with establishment medicine, to provide an alternative for people they reject. The moment we become part of their system, we stop being that alternative. So you're refusing the governor's offer? Rachel asked. I'm saying we need to be very careful about what we accept and what we don't. Money's useful. Authority is dangerous. She met with Hartley the next day with a counterproposal. We'll accept funding, she said, but we maintain operational independence. No required curriculum beyond basic standards. No mandatory establishment instructors. And most importantly, admission remains open to anyone qualified regardless of gender, race, or economic status. Hartley frowned. That's asking for a lot of autonomy. That's asking for the autonomy that makes this work. You can audit our results, inspect our facilities, require competency examinations for graduates, but you don't get to tell us who to teach or how to teach them. The Territorial Medical Board won't like that. The Territorial Medical Board can take it or leave it, but these are our terms. Hartley studied her for a long moment. You're not good at compromise, are you, Dr. Vance? I compromise on everything that doesn't matter. This matters. To her surprise, he laughed. Fair enough. I'll present your terms to the board. Can't promise they'll accept. Can't promise we'll care if they don't. But they did accept, after weeks of negotiation and modification. The final agreement gave Eliza most of what she wanted: funding, legal protection, expansion opportunities, while giving the territory what it needed: accountability, standards, demonstrated results. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was workable. The first satellite clinic opened the following spring, 40 miles west in a settlement that had never had a doctor. One of Eliza's graduates, a young woman named Susan Park, ran it with the same fierce determination Eliza recognized from her own reflection. The second opened that summer, then a third, then more, spreading across the territory like roots seeking water. And everywhere they went, the pattern repeated. People who'd been told they weren't good enough, smart enough, the right gender or class or color. People who'd been locked out and told to accept it. Finding a different door, walking through it, becoming healers. 2 years after the Denver hearing, Eliza stood on the porch of the original clinic and counted lights. 13 buildings now, housing 28 students, serving hundreds of patients a month. And beyond this mountain, 8 more clinics running on the same model, each one a small rebellion against the way things had always been. Rowan found her there, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders against the evening chill. Thinking deep thoughts? He asked. Thinking about that auction block in Red Hollow, about standing there believing my life was over. And now? Now I'm wondering how many other people are standing on their own auction blocks, thinking their lives are over, not knowing what they could build if someone just gave them a chance. You going to try to save them all? No, but I might teach some of them to save themselves. He pulled her close, and they stood together watching the clinic complex settle into evening. Somewhere inside, a student was studying anatomy by lamplight. In the surgery, James was teaching a new technique. In the wards, patients slept under the care of healers who'd been told they'd never be enough. I want to marry you, Rowan said suddenly. Eliza turned to look at him, surprised. We're already living like we're married, he continued. Building this place together. Making decisions together. You've met my ghost and I've met yours. Seems like we might as well make it official. That's possibly the least romantic proposal I've ever heard. You want romance? Fine. He got down on one knee, which was ridiculous and perfect. Eliza Vance, you're stubborn, impossible, brilliant, and the only person who's ever made me want to be alive again. Will you marry me? Still not very romantic. It's honest. Yeah, she said, pulling him to his feet. It is. And yes. They married a month later, nothing fancy, just a simple ceremony in front of the clinic with students and patients and townspeople who'd become family. Martha cried. Thomas gave an embarrassing speech about Eliza saving his leg and therefore making the wedding possible. Rachel and James stood up as witnesses. The party afterwards went late, full of laughter and terrible dancing and the kind of joy that comes from people who've survived hard things together. You happy? Rowan asked her as they finally escaped to the cabin, exhausted and grinning. Terrified, Eliza admitted. Happy. Both at once. That's usually how the good things feel. They fell asleep tangled together, the sounds of the celebrating clinic fading into mountain silence. The final challenge came from an unexpected direction. 3 years into the expansion, with 14 teaching clinics operating across 3 territories, the federal government took notice. A commission was formed to investigate frontier medical training. The chairman was a surgeon from Boston named Dr. Marcus Pemberton, and he arrived at the mountain clinic with an agenda visible from a mile away. Dr. Vance, he said, his tone suggesting the title pained him. I'm here to evaluate your program's compliance with federal medical education standards. We're not subject to federal standards, territorial authority only. Perhaps, but federal funding for territorial healthcare initiatives requires certain assurances. I'm here to provide those assurances. Or not, depending on what I find. He spent 2 weeks examining everything, sat in on lectures, observed surgeries, interviewed students and patients, took copious notes with an expression of perpetual disappointment. Eliza let him look. She had nothing to hide. On his last day, Pemberton delivered his assessment in Eliza's office, with territorial medical officials present. I'll be direct, he said. This program is a disaster waiting to happen. Inadequate instructor credentials, insufficient oversight, students from unsuitable backgrounds. You're creating doctors without proper foundation, sending them out to practice with minimal supervision. It's dangerous and irresponsible. That's your professional opinion? Eliza asked calmly. It's the opinion of every qualified physician who's reviewed your program. And what about the 300 lives saved last year alone? What about the communities that had no medical care until our graduates arrived? What about the success rates that match or exceed establishment hospitals? Statistics can be manipulated. Not these. They're independently verified by territorial medical authorities. Pemberton's expression soured. Nevertheless, I'll be recommending that federal funding be contingent on significant reforms, starting with requiring all instructors to hold degrees from accredited medical schools, which would eliminate me and half my teaching staff. If you're not qualified to teach, I've trained 28 doctors who are currently practicing across 3 territories with better outcomes than most of your accredited schools produce. But sure, I'm not qualified. Eliza stood. Dr. Pemberton, you came here with your mind already made up. You saw what you wanted to see. But here's what you missed. She walked to her window, gestured at the complex below. Medical education used to work like this. Master and apprentice. Hands-on learning. Doctors trained by doing, not just reading. Your accredited schools are barely 50 years old. For thousands of years before that, this is how it worked. And it worked because it focused on one thing, creating competent healers. Times have changed. Have they? Or have you just built walls around knowledge and convinced yourselves they're necessary? She turned back to face him. I'm not against standards. I'm against standards designed to exclude people who could save lives but don't fit your preferred mold. Pretty speech. Doesn't change my recommendation. Then make it. But know this. We'll keep operating with or without federal funding. These communities need us. And unlike you, we're not going anywhere. Pemberton left the next day, his report surely scathing, but something unexpected happened. One of his assistants, a young physician named Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd been mostly silent during the evaluation, stayed behind. Dr. Vance, she said, may I speak with you privately? They walked the mountain trail, Sarah choosing her words carefully. Dr. Pemberton is wrong, she said finally. What you're doing here, it's remarkable, revolutionary even. But he'll never admit that because it threatens everything he believes about medical education. I know. But not everyone in federal medical circles thinks like him. There are reformers, people who recognize that the current system is failing large parts of the country, people who might be allies if approached correctly. You're one of them. I am. And I think if you present your model differently, not as opposition to establishment medicine, but as a complementary approach for underserved areas, you might find support. It was smart, strategic, the kind of political thinking Eliza had never been good at. What would that look like? Over the next months, Sarah helped broker conversations between Eliza and reform-minded physicians in Washington. Not confrontation, but collaboration. Proposals for how teaching clinics could supplement traditional medical education, providing practical training that schools couldn't offer, and serving communities schools ignored. It was slow work, frustrating, full of compromise and negotiation, and swallowing her pride more times than Eliza liked. But it worked. The Federal Commission's final report included Pemberton's critique, but also a minority opinion signed by Sarah and 3 other physicians. That minority opinion recommended limited federal support for frontier teaching clinics as an experimental program, with results to be evaluated after 5 years. It wasn't everything, but it was something. And more importantly, it bought time and legitimacy, protection from future challenges, space to keep building. 5 years became 10. The experimental program became permanent. Teaching clinics spread beyond the territories into rural areas across the country. The model evolved. Some clinics partnered with established medical schools, creating hybrid programs that combine traditional and apprenticeship education. Rachel became the director of the Western Regional Network, overseeing 30 clinics. James pioneered surgical techniques that were adopted by hospitals nationwide. Students graduated and taught their own students, creating generations of physicians trained in the method Eliza had developed, half by design, half by necessity. And through it all, the original clinic on the mountain remained, the place where it started, where a woman bought on an auction block had built something that changed medicine in ways the establishment still struggled to accept. Eliza was 50 when she finally stepped back from daily operations, turning leadership over to her students while she focused on what she'd always loved most, teaching and treating patients. Her hair had gone gray, her hands showed the marks of decades of hard work, but her mind remained sharp and her determination undiminished. Rowan was grayer too, moving slower but still building, still maintaining the complex that had grown far beyond anything they'd imagined that first hard winter. They had never had children of their own. But the clinic was full of people they'd raised in different ways. Students who called them by first names or formal titles depending on mood. Patients who brought them gifts and gossip and the stuff of mountain life. One evening, sitting on their porch, the cabin had been expanded multiple times, but they still called it the cabin, Eliza watched students moving through the complex below. "You ever regret it?" Rowan asked. "The path you chose?" "Which part? Being blacklisted in Chicago? Getting sold in Red Hollow? Nearly dying multiple times?" "Any of it." Eliza thought about the auction block. About that moment when she'd almost given up, almost accepted that her life was over at 26. "No," she said. "Not even the worst parts, because they led here. That's probably not healthy thinking. Probably not, but it's honest." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that came from decades together, from building something that mattered, from choosing each other repeatedly through every difficulty and triumph. "What do you think happens to this place when we're gone?" Rowan asked. "It keeps going. That's the whole point. We built it to outlast us." "You're very certain." "I'm very hopeful. There's a difference." The sun set slowly, painting the mountain in golden shadow. Somewhere in the surgery, a student performed their first independent procedure. In the library, future doctors studied by lamplight. In the wards, patients healed under the care of healers who'd been told they weren't enough. And in the small cabin where it had all started, two people who'd survived everything sat together and watched their legacy breathe. "I love you," Eliza said. She didn't say it often enough. Never had been good at the soft words. "I know," Rowan replied. "You married me, didn't you?" "Best decision I ever made. Well, second best." "What was first?" "Following you up this mountain instead of running the other way." He laughed, pulled her close. "You were always terrible at running." "Yeah, lucky for both of us." Years later, when historians wrote about the frontier medical movement, they'd point to Eliza Vance's teaching clinics as revolutionary. They'd analyze her methods, her outcomes, her influence on modern medical education. They'd debate whether she was ahead of her time or simply responding to necessity. But the people who'd been there, who'd learned from her, or been healed by her, or built alongside her, knew the truth was simpler and more complex than any historical analysis could capture. She'd been a woman told she was worthless, who decided that assessment was wrong. She'd taken rejection and turned it into purpose. She'd built something impossible because no one had bothered to tell her it was impossible until it was already done. And in doing so, she'd shown others they could do the same. The teaching clinic on the mountain operated for another 60 years after Eliza's death at 73. Generations of doctors trained there, spreading across the country, carrying forward methods that had started in desperation and become tradition. The complex was eventually converted into a hospital and medical school that bore her name. The cabin was preserved as a historical site, and every year, new students climbed that same mountain trail, following in footsteps laid down by a woman who'd refused to accept the limits the world tried to impose. But that was later. That was history and legacy, and the kind of thing that mattered to people who came after. In the moment, in the life being lived, it was simpler. It was two people who'd found each other in impossible circumstances, building something good against all odds. It was students learning to heal. It was patients getting second chances. It was a community raised up by the belief that everyone deserved care, regardless of whether they could pay or fit into society's comfortable categories. It was Eliza Vance standing on the porch of the clinic she'd built, watching the sun set over mountains that had once seemed like the end of the world and had become the beginning of everything. And it was enough, more than enough. It was a life well lived, hard fought, and given freely to work that mattered. The auction block in Red Hollow was long gone, torn down and forgotten by people who moved on to other dramas. But the woman who'd stood on it, who'd been purchased for $200 and told she was worthless, had built something that would outlast stone and timber and the memory of anyone who'd dismissed her. She'd built proof that they were wrong, and on a mountain that didn't care about credentials or approval or the opinions of men who thought they knew better, that proof stood solid and real and absolutely undeniable. The outcast had become the founder. The rejected had become essential. The woman no one wanted had become the one everyone needed. And in the end, that was the only revenge worth having. Not destruction of enemies, not vindication from people who'd wronged her, just the quiet satisfaction of work done well, lives saved, and students taught to carry forward the belief that healing was a right, not a privilege. That was Eliza Vance's legacy. That was her triumph. That was enough.